Hi there, this is Jess Clark. This is week 8, the reading comprehension for informational text lesson plan, and this is for 3rd grade and above. And the prerequisites that students should have is that they should have some experience with their vocabulary instruction, and they should also be familiar with strategies for summarizing. Typically, this would take about 45 minutes depending upon the student's understanding, and if they're getting it, if they're not, it might be quicker, it might be a little bit longer. It's just kind of around that time frame. This would be used in whole class or small group. I would typically use this with whole class just because it's kind of long and super in-depth. Obviously, students aren't understanding it and you think that they might need some more support, you would do it in a small group. But just to have the most effective instruction for the most amount of students, I would do it whole class. The objective is that students are going to be able to coordinate a large number of strategies to guide their comprehension. Good morning, students. Today we're going to be learning about a collaborative strategic reading. That's a huge word that what we're going to be doing, but we're going to call it CSR today, okay? So let's say the word collaborative together. Collaborative. Do you guys know what it means to collaborate with somebody or to be collaborative? It means to work together with 2 or more people to work on something, to get something accomplished, right? So if I'm working with you guys and we're working all together as a class, we're all collaborating when we're talking. When you're working in your partners, you guys are collaborating. So strategic reading is a plan or strategy for understanding and remembering what you read. And we're going to do that collaboratively today, okay? So CSR has 4 main strategies. The first one is preview. Where do you think preview goes? Is it at the beginning, the middle, or the end? Typically at the beginning, right? The preview is when you're going and you're trying to look it over to get a feel of what you're getting yourself into. So then we have click and clunk. Sounds kind of goofy. That one, and then our next one, get the gist. Those ones can happen in the middle of the text. So those ones happen at any time. They don't happen, click and clunk can happen at one point. Get the gist can happen at another, and they might be able to switch. And then wrap up. Where do you think that one goes? At the beginning or at the end? At the end. So wrap up is when you're trying to get an idea, see if things are connecting, if your wrap up is connecting to your preview, if your thoughts were confirmed, if your predictions were confirmed, things like that. So like I said, preview is used before you read, wrap up is used after, and then click and clunk and get the gist are used quite frequently during our reading. Okay, so I passed out a copy of our reading today. It's called Pioneers on the Oregon Trail. You guys should have that at your desks. And I'm going to model to you guys how we're going to be using these CSR strategies using the first 2 sections in this book. So, class, what did I say the first strategy was in CSR? What do we do at the very beginning? We preview, right? So strong readers, they preview their text before reading it. And to preview it, there are 3 steps. You scan the text, you brainstorm what you already know, and then you predict what you'll learn. Can anybody tell me why we might need to brainstorm what we already know? If you already know it, why might you have to use it in your text? To make connections. Good job, guys. Yeah, what we want to do is we want to dig into our memories and see, is there anything that I already know about Pioneers on the Oregon Trail that might help me figure out things that I don't know in here? You need to build that bridge. You need to create that so that way you can make connections, right? Okay, so we know on here that the title of this is called Pioneers on the Oregon Trail. Can everybody point to that for me, please? Good job. It's in the black banner on the top of the page. So we know that this is an informational text. So what that means is that they often have graphic features like titles, headings, subheadings, maps, captions, a bunch of different visuals that give us facts and information about things. And in this case, all of the facts and the informational subheadings, the subtitles, visuals, sidebars, they're going to give us information on Pioneers on the Oregon Trail. So all these things are going into the Pioneers on the Oregon Trail, okay? So I'm going to start by previewing and scanning the first page. So I see that the title is the Pioneers on the Oregon Trail, right? That's right at the top of the page, like I said. So then I see two bold-faced headings. The first one, can anybody point to the first one and tell me what it says? Yeah, it's the Way West. That one's right at the top, right underneath our title. And then the other one at the bottom is called Packing for the Journey, right? And right to the left of that, I see a sidebar that has italicized writing on it. Do you guys see that? Do you know why we italicize things? Yeah, typically, and in this case, it's for a quote. So right here, you can tell that somebody said it. And you know that underneath the quote, it says that it was by Helen Stewart in 1853. So that's what happens when we typically see quotes, right? And then at the bottom of this page, I see that there is a timeline. And on this timeline, you have a bunch of different dates and you have a bunch of different events or different things that had happened at this time. And so you can kind of see all of the events that happened while these pioneers were on the Oregon Trail. So those things just give us a bunch of information on the pioneers of the Oregon Trail, right? Okay, so using what you saw during my scan of the passage, I want you guys to brainstorm what you already know about the topic. So maybe from cowboy movies, I know that pioneers traveled in these covered wagons, like the ones that are seen in your book right underneath that quote, like we said. And then I also know that these pioneers, when they traveled, they went from east to west. Pretty interesting, right? So maybe I'll be able to use those things from my memory that might help me understand some things in this passage. Okay, so it looks like we have some ideas brainstormed now. So now I want you guys to predict what you think you're going to learn from what you're reading. So maybe now, typically when we make predictions, we predict what's going to happen, but we don't always do that in informational text. Now we're just going to predict what we might learn. So these predictions can be based on clues in the text and what we already know. Again, digging into our memories here. So we need to make sure that we're supporting our reasoning as well. So I can say that based on the title and the headings and the picture of the covered wagons, I predict that I'm going to learn about the pioneer's journey on the Oregon Trail. In these covered wagons too, right? That was a really good indicator right there. And so based on this quote, I think I also might learn what the journey was like for these pioneers. And then based on the second journey, I think that I'm going to learn what they needed to pack when they went on their journey. Okay, so we have that. I'm glad you guys wrote that down. We need to keep that for later. Okay, so when we're reading, we need to be actively monitoring. Do you guys know what it means to monitor? It means to keep track of or to watch yourself and make sure that you're getting something. So we need to monitor our comprehension by noticing what we do understand and what we don't understand. And if we don't understand something, are we just not going to say it and then we're just going to keep reading and then just not understand? No, we need to make sure that if we're not understanding something, we need to go back and we need to make sure that we understand it, right? That's super, super important. Otherwise, like I said last week, we're going to leave gaps in our comprehension. And if we leave gaps, are we going to be able to get the whole picture? No. So think of a puzzle. If you have one puzzle piece missing, are you going to be able to get the whole picture? No, you're not. So that's what's going to happen. If I don't know one or two of these words in here, I'm not going to have that puzzle piece there. It's going to be missing, and I'm not going to get the whole picture. Okay, so when we're trying to do this in CSR, this is called click and clunk. Can you guys say that? Click and clunk. So when we're understanding the words in our text, they click with us, right? So imagine, picture this in your head. Imagine a train that's going down the tracks, and you hear them, they're going do-do, 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 do-do. Things are clicking, right? So when words or concepts are in our text that we're getting, they click with us, and we're rolling like a train down the train tracks. But if there are some words or concepts that we're not understanding, imagine that as being something thrown in the tracks. Let's say it's a branch, a tree branch. So you're going, the train's going, and then they hit the branch and maybe they're not understanding and maybe it throws them off the track. So we need to make sure that if we hit a clunk, we need to use a fix-up strategy. So this could be the vocabulary strategy. That might help us figure it out. And then remember that strategy is a way to figure out the meaning of an unfamiliar word by using the context clues and the word part clues in combination. So that means that we're using those together to try and figure out that one word. So we're going to practice the first 4 steps of this vocabulary strategy to figure out a clunk, okay? So I want you to follow along. I'm going to read the first paragraph of The Way West. Can everybody point to that boldface heading right there? It's right at the top. The Way West. Okay, follow along. In the early 1800s, Lewis and Clark explored the territory west of the Mississippi. No one knew what they would find. As they traveled, they made maps. They wrote in their journals. They described miles and miles of beautiful land with tall trees, good soil, and rushing rivers. So, I'm going to say I don't understand the word territory. I don't know what that means. So, I'm going to, the first step in this vocabulary strategy says that we need to look for exact clues. So, I'm going to read the words, phrases, sentences that are around territory to see if maybe I can find any context clues. So, I'm going to read that again. In the early 1800s, Lewis and Clark explored the territory west of the Mississippi. No one knew what they would find. As they traveled, they made maps. They wrote in their journals. They described miles and miles of beautiful land with tall trees, good soil, and rushing rivers. So I know it says that they explored the territory west of the Mississippi. So I know that the Mississippi is meaning that they're talking about the Mississippi River. I know that that is a place in the United States. So maybe they say it's west of the Mississippi. Still not, gives me some clues, but it doesn't give me everything. So in the last sentence, I also see that it says miles and miles of beautiful land. So maybe, since this says miles and miles of beautiful land, and I know that it's somewhere that's west of the Mississippi River, I'm thinking that it might be something to do with land. Do you agree? Yeah, I think that we can say that. That's pretty safe to say. So, the second step says that we need to try and break the word into parts. In territory, do we see any prefixes or suffixes that might help us out here? No, I don't. I don't see any of those, so we can skip that. So, step 3 says that we need to use a context clues, like we found in step 1, to guess the meaning. So, again, like I said, we see miles and miles of beautiful land, and we also see territory west of the Mississippi. We know that the Mississippi is the Mississippi River, and then it said miles and miles of beautiful land. So, again, I think it's safe to say that it might be a big area of land. All right, so step 4 says we need to try out the meaning in the original sentence. So, we're going to say that this is a big area of land. We're going to substitute the word territory for big area of land, and we'll see if it makes sense. In the early 1800s, Lewis and Clark explored the big area of land west of the Mississippi. Does that make sense? Do you think that that's what it means? I think so too. It makes sense. Okay, moving on. Good readers also can identify the most important ideas in the text and in what they're reading. So, in CSR, this is called getting the gist, and I know you've heard about that before. So basically, that means that imagine a sifter. Do your parents ever use those when they're making pasta and they need to get the noodles separated from the water? They use a sifter. So we're going to imagine our reading like a pot of water and noodles. Okay, so when we have all of that, pretend that the pot is the book and the noodles in the water, it's all of the information inside of the book or the text. So what we need to do is we need to separate the fluff information, so maybe the interesting information, from the important information. So we're going to separate those. So the noodles are going to be our important information. The water is going to be the fluff, okay? So we need to separate those. And what we do when we get the gist is we're going to shrink the information into a really good main idea statement, but it has to be in 10 or fewer words. Because if we have any more than that, then it just drags on, and then it can get confusing. So we need to summarize that whole main idea in 10 words or less. So I think I can say that for my main idea statement, or my gist, I can say that Lewis and Clark were the first to explore the territory west of the Mississippi. Pretty easy, pretty simple, but does it summarize everything in here? Do we need to say that they wrote in their journals in our main idea? Do you think that's a main idea of this? I don't think so either. I think it's the main idea of the first paragraph in The Way West is that Lewis and Clark were the first to explore the territory west of the Mississippi. So, what was our last step? Does anybody remember? What do we do at the very, very end of our reading? We wrap up. So, when we wrap up, it has two parts. We ask and answer questions, and then we review what we've learned. So, when you're asking and answering questions, you really need to think about the kinds of questions that a teacher might ask on a test. So, I'm going to model this by generating some of these questions about what we just read. So, focusing on the main ideas, or the ideas in my main idea statement or my gist statement, I'm going to begin each question with who, what, when, where, why, or how. Okay? I know that we've covered those. We have them on an anchor chart over here. So I'm going to make sure that all of my questions reflect the three types of QAR. Does everybody remember those? We have right there, so that means that the answer is right there in the text. You don't have to do any more piecing together. We have think and search, so that means that we might have different answers to our question in the text, but we might have to piece them together. And then we have author and me, and that means that basically we need to get into the author's head and we need to kind of infer what they're thinking. So we need to assume what they're thinking, but we're going to use what we see in the text to make those inferences, okay? So here are my questions that I have generated. Who explored the territory west of the Mississippi in the early 1800s? Lewis and Clark, right? Is that one right there, or is it one that we have to go search for? Nope, it's right there. Okay, my next question. What did the pioneers leave behind? They left behind their personal belongings. They left behind special treasures, comforts of home, and they even left behind family and friends, right? And that one, we have to do a little thinking and a little searching to start piecing those answers together, right? Okay, and why do you think that people were willing to pack up and head west? They thought they would get rich, right? So that one is an author and me because the answer is not right there. And we're asking somebody what they think. So do you think that when you're asking somebody what they think, that answer is going to be right in the text? No, because it's their opinion, okay? So in the second part of the wrap-up, we're going to review by noting the important information that we learned, okay? So it helps to go back to the list that we brainstormed and the predictions that we made, and I know you guys wrote those down in your notebooks, so we're going to go see if any of our brainstorms were confirmed, right? I need you to take a look at all of your brainstorms. Were they confirmed? Yeah. And we also learned some other new information. So now we're going to jot those down. So I learned that people knew about the West from Lewis and Clark. And after gold was discovered in California in 1848, it's crazy. Thousands of people crossed the Oregon Trail in covered wagons to search for a new life, right? Okay, and last, we finally knew that the Oregon Trail was thousands of miles long and it took so many months to cross. Good job. Okay, guys, you did a great job in helping me with that. So now I'm going to guide you when we do this. So remind me, what are the three parts of a preview strategy? Scanning, brainstorming, and predicting. Predicting what's going to happen or predicting what we're going to learn. Yep. So I want you to scan the next two sections of the selection, which is called Wagons Ho. What graphic features do you see? I know I see a few here. I see a sidebar right here. It says that we need supplies for one person, and then it says supplies for one family. I see a picture of a covered wagon. On the next page, I see a map. I see a bunch of facts underneath here. I see another fact, a did you know column. I see a bunch of different graphics there, right? Okay, and so what do we do during our brainstorming? We think about what we already know about the topic, right? So I want you to use what you know to create a brainstorm. Are you familiar with one of the landmarks on the Oregon Trail maybe? That could be one of your brainstorms. Okay, and what is a prediction? It's an educated guess based on what we already know in the text and then what we see in the text and what we already know in our memory, right? So I want you guys to predict what you think you're going to learn in this text and from this reading. Yeah, what do you think you're going to learn? You think you're going to learn about wagons? You think you're going to learn about reading a map? Okay. Awesome. Those are all good predictions, and we're going to see. We're going to go back and we're going to check to see if those are made later. Okay, so what does it mean when we say that our reading clicks? We understand it, right? And what do we mean if it clunks? We're not understanding, okay? So I'm going to read aloud the first paragraph of Wagons Ho. It's on the right-hand page here. And I want you guys to write down any clunks that you guys have on a piece of paper, and then we're going to talk about them after we finish reading. Okay, first paragraph. Pioneers gathered at starting points between Independence, Missouri and Council Bluffs, Iowa to join up with wagon trains heading west. It was safest to travel with 10 to 15 wagons in a group. Wagon trains did not set out there until there was enough grass growing on the prairie to feed the animals along the way. At the same time, they could not wait too long. The wagons had to get over the mountains before it started to snow. Awesome. So, are there any clunks about what I just read? No, right? Did you guys see a familiar word in there? Yeah, I saw Council Bluffs, Iowa. That's pretty interesting, right? That's something that maybe we already knew. It's where we live, right? Okay, so everything clicked to you? No clunks? Okay, good job. So, what do we do when we're trying to get the gist of something? What do we do? We're shrinking a paragraph into how many words? 10 words or less. Okay, so we're going to use the following steps of paragraph shrinking to get the gist of the first paragraph of Wagons Ho. And that was what I just read, okay? So, we are going to use the who, what, when, where, why, and how, remember? Okay, so who or what is this paragraph about? They're about the wagons, right? And what is the most important information about wagon trains? They had to get out early enough, otherwise they couldn't get over the mountains when it started to snow. Okay? And I want somebody, can any of my friends here shrink this into 10 words or less? Awesome. So our friend said, wagon trains left early to avoid snow in the mountains. Let's count that. Wagon trains left early to avoid snow in the mountains. 10 words or less? Yep, I think we're good to go. That's a great gist statement. So now I want you guys to try and create a gist statement on your own for the next two paragraphs. Okay, can anybody give me a gist statement for paragraph 1? Pioneers often walked the trail to avoid the uncomfortable ride. 10 words or less? I think we're good. Okay, the next paragraph. Famous landmarks on the trail helped the pioneers during their journey. Is that 10 words or less? No, it was 11 words. But I think sometimes when we have a bigger paragraph, as we can see that was a bigger paragraph, sometimes it's okay. We were one word over, okay? Now, if it were 20 words, do you think that would be all right? No, I would say we need to shrink that down a little bit more. But if you have 11 and even maybe 12 words, that might be fine, but we need to make sure we're taking all of the fluff out and we're only having that important information. Remember, think of it like the sifter or like the strainer. You're trying to get the noodles or the meat of the information, the important information, separated from the fluff, which is the water, right? Okay, so at the very, very end, what's the last step that we do? We wrap up. And then what were the two parts of the wrap up? We ask and answer questions, and we review what we learned. So the first thing that we need to do is think of the questions again that the teacher might ask. And what are they going to begin with? Who, what, when, where, why, and how. Okay, so what are the types of QAR? Right there, search and find, and author and me. Okay, first question. How big was a wagon train? It could be 1 mile long and 1 mile wide, right? Is that right there? Yep, I see it right there. And what about, what was the most important thing about the timing of the trip? They couldn't leave until there was enough grass on the ground to feed the animals, right? But they had to get there before it started to snow. Right there? No, we had to think and search. We had to piece things together, right? Okay, what do you think would be the most challenging landmark on the trail? Laurel Hill? Because their covered wagons could be destroyed and they were almost at the end. You think that might be challenging? Now, was that one right there? No, that one was the author and me, right? Okay, so now when we review, we're only going to be writing down the important information that we learned. Are we adding the fluff? No, we're only adding the important information, okay? So, we can say that for safety, the wagons traveled in big groups because the animals needed to graze. They needed to graze on the grass. So the trip was long and uncomfortable, and many people walked. And we also know the landmarks were important because it guided and supported their journey, right? Awesome job. You guys are getting really good at this. So now, because I think you guys have mastered this, you guys are going to get into your elbow partners, and you're going to be doing this on the last page of this passage. So this will be a day on the trail and the end of the trail. It's on this page right here. You can see it. It's got the cow on the page. So, and I'm going to be walking around to check in with you guys to make sure that you're understanding. But if you guys need a graphic organizer or a list of sentence starters or a list of prompts, or if you need some visual aids to help you remind you through this process, I know that we had a lot to cover. I have those at my desk. I will bring those around to you. I just need you to raise your hand so I know I can get you one, okay?